And looks like we are recording. Cool. I don't want to take away any time from Bill's presentation. So thank you guys so much for joining. This is being recorded and will be posted I'll get it up on YouTube, and we'll put it on the Pardot Geeks blog, and I'm sure Bill will also probably put it on his blog as well, or something like
Absolutely.
that. So I'll make sure that he has the embed. But feel free to ask questions. Everyone is on mute by default. So if you have a question, feel free to use the chat. Bill, don't feel like you have to keep an eye on it if it's going to mess up your flow. I'll be kind of having a look at it as well.
Yep.
And if I hear like an opportunity to inject a question, then I will, or we'll just kind of leave it towards the end. With that, I will hand it over to Bill, who will intro and will start his presentation. Bill, you do have a share screen option on the bottom.
I do, and I'll need to do that.
Yes.
Yes, I will. In fact, we'll start with that before I do anything. Window, this one, share that one. There we go. Hey, there it is.
Awesome. Okay, I will hand off to Bill. I'll be in the background, but take it away.
All right. Well, thanks, Ben. I'm Bill Fetter. I'll just give you a little bit of background. Ben was kind enough to ask me to present here when we were talking about this particular solution, and he thought it would be a good topic for a user group, and I agree. So I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I'm an account engagement and consultant. I have to retrain myself, account engagement consultant. I also do Sales Cloud work, Salesforce partner, marketing champion, and I have 29 years of I counted it up. It's scary. I have 29 years of B2B experience, 5 of it in sales, 24 of it in marketing, and of that 24, 21 of digital marketing, and 10 in the Salesforce platform. So you might ask, what digital marketing was available 21 years ago? Not a lot, but back when I was still working in my corporate job, we had an AdWords account that dated back to 2002. And whenever we had a rep get on, they were astonished at how old that account was. But hey, if you got the same account, why get rid of it? You got all your history. Anyway, what we're going to talk about today is something that I sort of coined this when I was coming up with this presentation, and what it is, these are account engagement hacks for cheap mortals. Okay. And why do I say cheap mortals? Well, the first one is I don't like spending a lot of money on stuff I don't have to. So I like looking for tools that can solve a problem without spending a huge amount of development time and effort on it. And mortals meaning that I am not an API. I am not an API person. I am not a programmer by trade. Everything I know, I've learned by doing it. So what I try to put together are things that just about anybody with at least a reasonable amount of knowledge can do. And it's not something where you have to have a super expert, or you're developing code and posting a Git and all that stuff. So cheap stuff, everybody pretty much can do. That's what I like to share in terms of these kinds of presentations. So we're going to talk about LinkedIn lead gen forms. So we got to start with what are we talking about exactly. So inside LinkedIn Campaign Manager, you have something called a lead gen form. You can build ad campaigns that use the lead gen form as the call to action inside of it. And it is a little form which you can use then to send someone to a landing page outside of LinkedIn, or you can offer some downloaded content and so forth, or you can even just have it be a lead gen form, although I wouldn't recommend that because usually people are going to give up their information. You want to give them something in return. The parameters of these, you can have up to 12 data points, essentially. Though you can draw those from a combination of stuff that comes from the LinkedIn profile. So their contact info, their work info, their function, their job seniority, what their company name is, what the size and some of that firmographic data, size and industry, the education level, what their degree was, what their field was. Some people find that useful. I have a client actually that finds that very useful. You can have up to 3 custom questions if you want to. They can be multiple choice or they can be fill in the blank. And then you can have up to 20 additional hidden fields, which are not drawn from the above. So you can't basically hide what you're collecting from their LinkedIn profile, but you can put in things like if you wanted to put in, some UTM fields to define things, or some stuff to identify the content of the forum and that sort of stuff, or what your campaign was called or how you were putting it together. So you can put in a bunch of hidden fields if you want to. So that's what it does. So you're collecting these lead gen forms and you're running these campaigns. And let's be truthful. LinkedIn's not a cheap place to run an ad, but it is a very, very well-defined audience. You do know who you're speaking with, and when you get these forms filled, you actually get some pretty good information from it. Now, the problem with LinkedIn has always been that it's sort of a walled garden, right? They want you to keep all the information that you're getting in there and not make it easy to get it out, right? In fact, the Salesforce connector for Sales Navigator, everybody always thinks, oh, I can connect Sales Navigator to Salesforce and I can suck everything out of Sales Navigator and put it in my Salesforce instance. Nope, that's not what it does. What it does is it sucks everything out of Salesforce and puts it in LinkedIn, and then you can use it there. But you can't actually take anything out of LinkedIn. This is one of the very few ways that you can actually get something out of LinkedIn. So that's why that's what the in LinkedIn is. I think it's keep it in here. It's all staying in here. So the thing about the LinkedIn lead gen forms, though, is they do let you get it out, but they just want you to download it, which is not that useful, right? Because now I've got to remember, oh, I got to download something, or I got a lead, now I got to download it, I got to put it somewhere else. And of course, you want to do that pretty quickly. And if you want to have some follow-on activity, it's helpful if you're not doing this all manually. So enter, how do you do this in an easy way? And I don't know that LinkedIn will ever make it easy, but it does have an API and they have allowed certain things to happen. So enter some kind of a tool to get the leads out with the API. But as I said, I'm not an API person, so I'm going to use something easy. I'm going to use something simple. I'm going to use Zapier. And it does have a connector to LinkedIn lead ads, and it has a connector to lots of other things, including account engagement, Pardot, whatever you want to insist on calling it. So some of you might be saying, well, yeah, of course, there's a Pardot Pardot account engagement module in Zapier. Don't you just connect the two up and send it on? And the answer is, well, yeah, you can do that. But what I want to show you today is what I would suggest is the right way to do it versus several other ways that maybe are not the best ways to do it. So if you've thought, well, yeah, there's, this is what you do. I connect LinkedIn ads with Pardot, and when I have a form response, I create a prospect, right? Isn't that the way to do it? And I would say, well, that's probably not the best way to go about this. Why? Well, Wonder Twin powers AMPC, and you get a duplicate when you do that. You get duplicates when you put in new leads or new prospects with the API. Now, this is not unique to Zapier. Lots of other systems that use the API will also exhibit this same behavior, and it's something that we don't think about until we hook something up because someone asked us to do it, and then you start noticing, wait a minute, I'm getting duplicates now. So here's my position on duplicates. Marketers should not create duplicates, right? That's what sales are for. That's what sales is for, right? Sales is to create, salespeople are creating duplicates, not marketers. So we should be able to blame all the duplicates in the system on the marketer or on the salespeople, not the marketing team. So I really, really, really try to scrupulously avoid creating duplicates when I can. So, so you might say, well, what other choices do we have? Well, what about doing this? Isn't there, don't you not even need to use Zapier? Isn't there this thing in there called LinkedIn Lead Gen, and you can connect up LinkedIn and you can, push those things into Salesforce right away? Well, that, again, this looks like an obvious thing to use, and it doesn't require anything else. But based on, when you look at the documentation on this aspect of Salesforce, you find that it has a limit of 500 fills in a day, which means it's actually web to lead. And what does web to lead do? Hey, it creates duplicates in account engagement, and it creates duplicates in Salesforce too. So again, I don't like using things that create duplicates. This is why I always say don't use account engagement and web to lead at the same time, because then you're just basically creating duplicates. If every time some new record comes into Salesforce, you created an account engagement, well, that's the one for sure way that you'll end up with duplicates. So if we don't want to do that, we don't want to create duplicates, what do we do? Well, you might say, well, in Zapier, wouldn't we do this? We would find the prospect. We have a new lead gen form response. Then we have to find the prospect in Pardot, because this says Pardot still, doesn't say account engagement. I guess they didn't get the memo. So we would find the prospect in Pardot and create a new one if it didn't exist, or we would update it if it already did exist. So yeah, that would work. That would work. Here's again my come back to the cheap thing. This uses 2 actions, and in the immortal words of Name That Tune, I can do that in 1 action with this alternative method that I'm going to show you. And that alternative method actually opens up some new options that you don't really have access to when you do it this way. Now, if you do it this way, it gives you 3 tiny little things that you can't get when you're doing it the way I'm about to show you. And those 3 tiny little things are: you can identify the campaign. You can identify the campaign when you're sending the thing in, but you're going to identify the campaign anyway with the method I'm using if they're new. You can star the prospect if you want to, and you can mark the prospect as reviewed if you want to. So those are not terribly useful things to use instead of this method that I'm going to show you right now. So what we're going to do instead of using the built-in account engagement modules is we're going to use the webhook module, which is also available. Now you have to have both of these, both being able to connect to LinkedIn and being able to connect to Salesforce for account engagement in Zapier. Those are all paid apps anyway. So you have to have a paid account to do this, but you can have the lowest level paid account. A lot of times when you're doing LinkedIn lead gen forms, if that's really all you're doing, you don't get enough volume on these to be all that concerned over overrunning your limits. But again, I like to be very conservative, and I'm stingy with my zaps. So that's why I like to do this in basically in one step if I can, because that actually holds back other zaps that I can use for other purposes. So we're going to use the webhook module, and we're going to use the post option in the webhook module. So essentially when you're setting it up, it's going to look like this. The app is webhook, the event is post. The details are the URL. That's a form account engagement form handler. That's the form handler URL that you put in there. Now, I love form handlers. Form handlers, I think, are one of the most underrated pieces of tech inside of account engagement. I love them. They have all kinds of purposes. Here's yet another one. So that's your form handler's URL once you create this. The payload type is form. Makes sense. Then we start doing our matching, and the stuff on the left is your whatever you define as your system field. The stuff on the right is coming out of the lead gen form. So you would put in what all of the stuff is from the lead gen form, and match those things up. However many fields you want to create, go wild with it. In fact, there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Again, that you couldn't do if you were just using the account engagement thing by itself. For instance, you can submit to the same field multiple times. So if you had a field that allowed you to collect multiple responses, you could actually put it in there, 2 or 3 times if you wanted to, and submit different pieces of data to the same field repeatedly. That might not work in this scenario, but using this webhook methodology, if you had another reason to do a form handler, that's absolutely something you could do. The other thing, of course, you can do, and you could do it with the other means as well, is if you wanted to put in some static text into a field, you can do that. So if you wanted to put, a static text in here instead of a field that's related to the form fill, you could do that. Or you can combine fields coming from the form and static text as well in that space. It all works. The other thing that might be useful here, again, that you wouldn't have to use an action on the account engagement side of things, is you could put a timestamp on here for when the form was filled, and there's a timestamp shortcode in Zapier that you can use to basically define when the zap ran. So that might be a useful thing if you had a field where you were trying to timestamp when things came in. You could have the field here put in a dynamic date time that says when it happened. So that might be useful to you as well. And then you don't have to use that as a completion action at the other end. So the zap itself, the form handler itself, the key stuff here is you'd have to do it in kiosk mode because you don't want these people cookied to Zapier. That wouldn't make any sense. And you want to disable that visitor activity and send the autoresponder after every submission. Basically, you would just want this. It's many things as it sends. You want to have it receive. So put those two things. Click those two things on. Success and error locations don't really matter, except for a trick I'm going to show you in a little bit. But again, because you're posting to this, it's not actually a session. It's just coming from another. It's coming from another system. So we're not sending anybody anywhere. So those actually really don't matter that much. But what really is useful here, and the reason that you do it this way and don't do it using the account engagement modules in Zapier, is completion actions. Now you have, rather than I've just pushed in a new person, and now I have to figure out a way to deal with a new prospect that came from Zapier. Here, using this method, now I have all of my completion actions available, which I can use every time I get a new form fill from LinkedIn Lead Gen. So that's opens up all kinds of possibilities of stuff you can do, so that every time a lead gen form comes in, I can say, well, if it's this, I can do this. If it's already assigned, I can notify the assigned user. If it's not assigned, I can assign it. If it's comes from this industry, I could put it in this list, and so on and so on and so on. So go wild on that. Except that there are some limitations, and I brought this up a year ago when this came out. We really have to think about the completion action limitations now, because we're limited to what I'm calling sort of the 1-6-15 rule, which is you get one one set of rules, one set of actions that applies to everyone that comes through. And then you have up to 6 conditions that you can use. But in total, between all those things on the left, you can only have 15 total actions. So you might look at this and say, well, that seems like plenty. Well, I thought so too. And then I started running into the limits over and over again. So you have to be circumspect about what you're going to do here. And sometimes you have to think of ways that I'm going to consolidate things, or I'm going to timestamp it in Zapier instead of timestamping it as a completion action, or I'm going to send it to a downstream process that's going to do something else. Or there's one other trick. And this does work. And that is, remember when I said, don't worry about the success location? Well, if you enable data forwarding to the success location, and you make the success location another form handler, you get 15 more conditional completion actions, right? You only need to forward one field on the next handler. You just need to forward email, and you might want to, you might want to use one of those completion actions to say, don't score this. In fact, you might not want to score the other one either. Now, in theory, this could happen unlimited. I mean, in theory, you could just keep passing from one form handler to another. I don't know what the practical limit of that is. I'm not sure I do it more than once. But in theory, you could just keep forwarding form handlers to other form handlers. So that's, again, the reason why we don't want to use the account engagement module in Zapier, because we get all these form handler options. To do things with, because if you're pushing somebody in otherwise, you have to then figure out a way, I got to identify that these people came from this thing, and then I got to figure out an automation to put them through, or I got to put them through some kind of engagement studio or something. Well, here I get all these automations by just sending them through the webhook instead of using the create new prospect from Zapier. So let's talk about a few other things that you can do when you're using this thing, and this is regardless of how you're using it. This stuff is available. So if you've ever looked at what you get, okay. So there's a question. So thinking of this from a UX perspective, what sort of content are you having on the second? You don't have to. So again, the second form handler, all you have to do is accept an email address. I'm only forwarding the email address because I don't care about, all the fields are the same otherwise, right? I don't need to redo any of those fields. The person in, so let me be clear about what happens on the LinkedIn side, right? When the person fills out a form on LinkedIn, the completion action that you're telling LinkedIn, you're either sending them to a website or you're giving them a download. That has nothing to do with anything we just talked about. That is strictly LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, yeah, you could send them to a landing page on your website. You could give them a piece of documentation if you want to. But all of this other stuff we're talking about is completely invisible. It's completely invisible to the user because it's happening behind the scenes. In fact, it's not even really happening in real time. LinkedIn is not sending these to you the instant it happens. It's doing it kind of, let's say, leisurely. It's not like it batches them up and sends them all like at the end of the day, but it certainly is not sending them the minute it happens. So that's why it doesn't really matter what any of this stuff is, because they're not seeing it. Nobody's seeing what it's doing. But when that information does come in its leisurely fashion into Zapier, there's other stuff. If you look at what it's sending in that payload beyond just, these are the fields we got from the form, it's sending you a whole lot of other information that's really interesting. It sends you what the campaign name was. It sends you the campaign group. It sends you what the targeting details of that campaign were. It sends you the name of the form. It sends you the version of the ad that the person responded to when they filled out the form. Now that's really interesting. So on the right side here is a screenshot out of one of my clients that we're taking the ad version that comes with the form, passing that to account engagement and passing it to Salesforce. And so in the lead, they have this little window that says, this is the headline, the copy, and the picture that the person clicked when they filled out the form. So that is all sitting now in Salesforce. And if they do it, if somebody comes through the form multiple times, it overwrites and it shows you the last thing they clicked. But this is reportable because we just put it in Salesforce. So now I can run a report. Now I can run a report here on, well, how many, what were the leads that converted and which ads did they respond to? So that's really interesting stuff that we get just because it comes along with that payload from LinkedIn ads. So the one thing about this though is that if you disable any of the ads, the pictures do go away. But they do store it as long as those pictures remain in your library. Those pictures seem to remain available on LinkedIn and will show up because what you're pulling here is you're actually pulling the picture from LinkedIn's archive of the actual ad. So it's actually pulling LinkedIn's version of that picture. So this is very cool stuff that you could do. And of course, because you're doing it in Zapier, you could also, if you wanted to, you could send this to a Google Sheet, and you could analyze stuff there as well. Because again, you've got all that payload information. You could send it off somewhere else and do analysis independent of Salesforce if you wanted to. But this was to demonstrate that you can pass more information that's useful about these ads straight through and use it in your response activity. So that's something that's a real screenshot. So there's a few gotchas on this technique, and it mainly has to do with how LinkedIn works. Every time you do a new form, you get a totally different field order, it seems, of how it's sending you stuff. So I don't recommend having one Zap that serves all your forms, because I've had stuff where it's gotten like the form comes in and like the fields are all in a different order than they were on the last form. So I kind of have to say, okay, every time we have a new form, we've got to change, we got to put a new Zap in place to deal with the new form. But you could send them all to the same form handler. It doesn't, that doesn't matter. But the Zap itself, the form mapping can be tricky. Again, an annoyance with LinkedIn that causes the former problem is that you can't change a form after you made it in LinkedIn. Once it's created, once it's there, you cannot change anything about it. You can change maybe the destination, but you can't change the fields. You can't change any of that stuff. So that's an annoyance with this process. So it is a little fussy to work with. The other thing that we've discovered in doing this is that the email addresses you get from LinkedIn aren't always great, because LinkedIn does allow you to carry multiple email addresses in there. And even though what you ask for in the form is their business email, it's whatever their default email address is. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter what it says on that form. What shows up there is their business email, is their default email address. And a lot of times that could be a Gmail account. It could be a Hotmail account. So when somebody fills out that form, they have the option to change the email address if they choose to, but it's pre-filled for them, and a lot of times they don't. So what you end up getting oftentimes with these campaigns when you're passing that information from these forms is you're getting Gmail accounts and you're getting other stuff, which, hey, that's the only acceptable way to get a duplicate is they gave me a Gmail account and they were already in here with their business email account. So that's not marketing's fault. The system timing, we also mentioned, it's a little, it's not instantaneous. And we were comparing sort of quality checking things. We also found that their time, their system timestamp is some strange time zone. If you're trying to cross compare how many things did supposedly send in the 24-hour period versus how many things did I see, you got to watch what the time of the day was, because some things could be in the wrong day. I've also found that form testing in general on LinkedIn is annoying because the way that you have to submit a test form is very convoluted and stupid. It's just stuff you have to deal. I mean, all of this is just stuff you have to deal with because LinkedIn is LinkedIn, and that's what it is. And as I mentioned earlier, Zapier Premium is a requirement. No way around that one. And I think that's it. Actually, that is it. All right. So, wow. I didn't think this was going to be very long, but I did manage to talk for half an hour. So
well, that was awesome.
I will take this off the screen.
If anyone has questions, feel free to raise your hand, or actually, I don't know if you can do a hand raise in this, but if you have something, let me know and I can try and take you off mute.
Has anyone tried to do that? Has anyone tried to do this? Is the other question I would pose to the folks that are on the line.
Yeah, I mean, has anyone done the LinkedIn to Pardot form handler integration?
Right, because I mean, this is not. This doesn't have to be LinkedIn. Actually, it could be anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It could be anything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely they're the things that I've seen, the problems that I've seen when trying to do an integration like this is oftentimes you'll lose the cookie relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a form, a hosted form on a third party or a CMS even, and you need to route it using a more complex process. Like I've seen it where with a form completion collects the value into the CMS, and then it also sends it to Pardot. And because there's that splitting, the split causes the cookie relationship to sever. And so it dumps the value into Pardot, great, but it's at the cost of the cookie passing. So you're no longer able to use that cookie for other things, and not able to record pre and post visit activity. And even thereafter, it would require a separate interaction. So that is one thing that
there's no cookie. I mean, there's no cookie here because it's coming from third party.
Yeah, there is no cookie. But when you do use a Zapier or another kind of tool, that is a risk that needs to be either acceptable or engineered to try and maybe retain it. And it's hard because it's very much the cookie relationship to the action is very, it's just there. And then once you try and pull it apart and do two things with it, the cookie just kind of falls through the middle. And it's nope, not there anymore. It's kind of the best way that I can think to explain it. So there's a question, is Zapier the only third party option? I don't think so. I mean, there's others that are I would say probably certainly more complex and more, I don't want to say capable, but definitely you can do more with it, but they're also going to be more expensive.
Or they're harder to use. I mean,
or they're harder to use. They're more technical in nature.
Integromat, now called Make, can do this. The last time I tried it, to be honest, and maybe it's better now, but the last time I tried it, there were issues that it gagged on the connection to LinkedIn. So, and there was no way to reset it, and it was I just gave up. I mean, honestly, I tried. It gagged on the connection, and then I could never get it working again.
Yeah, I've had a client. I had to run it through a Azure. Azure DevOps, or Azure, and through an Azure server, because it had to go from LinkedIn to a pre-existing Leads API, and then the Leads API is what then hooked into Pardot to post the data. So it was really complicated for very little payoff, but that's how it had to be. So when you start dealing with things like that, then you have to have, it requires a more technical solution. So what you have here is great when you have kind of that LinkedIn to Pardot. There's very little middleman there. It's just literally just kind of trying to complete the process. When you start saying, oh, but I have this other API or this third party dam that I need to push data into, then it becomes maybe a little bit outside of what the Zapier solution can handle, or you have to implement the Zapier solution at a different point. It becomes after it's collected, and then it becomes basically Pardot to the dam instead of Pardot to LinkedIn. So
Catherine suggested Leads Bridge, which is another possibility. I've used that. I don't remember if it has an 8. What you're looking for if you want to do the same thing again. That's the beauty of account engagement, Pardot, with the form handlers is, as long as the solution has a module that is and Zapier calls it webhook, and really what it is it's HTTP post. If it's got that kind of a module, then it doesn't matter whether it has a native integration or not, because a form handler is an HTTP post. So you don't need a named, in fact, like we just demonstrated, a named connector actually doesn't necessarily help you. So as long as the solution you've got has connects to LinkedIn lead gen, and you've got an HTTP post module, which is actually how Integromat does it, because they don't have a Pardot connector. Then you can do this. Again, I'm looking at it from the perspective of a lot of people know some of these tools, these ones that are out there, especially and Zapier is, it's so cheap, really. Especially if you've got a couple of limited things that you need to do, you can get away with the starter pack, the single user starter pack, and it's like what, $20 a month. It's really inexpensive. So again, Pardot hacks for mere mortals. That's really the goal here is to yes, of course. I'm sure some of these other platform-based things can do the same with even more choices. This is I need to implement it quickly. I implemented this, not counting the thing with the pictures and all that, but I implemented this for the client in like an hour. So, then that included buying the package from Zapier. So it's really how do you get something done efficiently and end up with a solution that's useful. And in this particular case, these things come in, they go through a process. They go through there's a bunch of completion actions, but then they go through an engagement studio, and a whole bunch of things happen based on, was it an existing client? Is it a lead? Was it a contact? Is it owned by somebody? What industry is it in? A whole bunch of things happen. So that's the real benefit of this in terms of an automation process. Because somebody did take the time to do something on LinkedIn, and we've got an action, and now we can take further downstream things as a result of that. A lot of times, companies don't do anything. They collect your information on LinkedIn, and then nothing happens, right? So that's the idea of make sure if you're going to spend that money, because it's not cheap, on LinkedIn lead gen, that you're doing something with it, right? You're doing something useful with it, and trying to determine the level to which that person is that person actually is interested in your company.
Yeah, exactly. And LinkedIn, that's increasingly where people, especially in B2B, when they're being much more particular about their ad spend, they're finding a lot of people are finding that LinkedIn can often provide more more ROI, often at a higher cost, because
Yeah.
the CPM and the CPC rates are going to be sometimes significantly higher than traditional AdWords or things of that nature. But that is because it's a much more tailored audience. So, and then the fact that you can do forms right in the ad is also makes it really exciting. But getting it into a marketing automation tool, getting it into CRM is where the your next thought is, well, how because there's nothing immediately obvious. There's no like native integration, so to speak. So if you have, so this is a great solution if you are approached by your leadership or somebody says, hey, I need to be able to bring this in, and there's no middleman. There's no like, oh, but it also needs to go to this third-party database, or oh, it also needs to go into this API. That is not probably the best use case for this. This is a kind of a A to B kind of end kind of solution. If you already have like an enterprise integrator that is doing other things, you could you most likely could create another path, create another integration area and say, listen, now I need to do this LinkedIn to Pardot. You would use likely webhooks, and it would definitely be a probably more technical solution than this. But this Zapier is not the only way, but it is a way that you can do it if it's a point A to point B kind of thing.
Well, and the other thing is, depending on the velocity of changes in your ad account, again, if you're doing this, if you had an API wizard, right? I mean, you also got to think of the opportunity cost of having your API wizard do something that you could do for less than his hourly cost on a monthly basis, especially when you look at the problems that I outlined in how LinkedIn deals with new forms, right? Basically every time you create a new form, you've got to make sure that the mapping, the mapping that it returns on an API query is consistent, because it may not be. The way that it does testing is sort of a pain in the butt. So the fact that Zapier has gotten all this sorted for you, and it's giving you so much information, like you don't have to write a query. I mean, the payload that comes in is literally 250 lines long of stuff that it gives you on a single lead. So you don't have to write the query that produces all that information. It's already there for you, and then every time you create a new ad, all you have to do is send a new form. You have to send a new test through, and you've got the new mapping. So it is a heck of a lot easier than somebody writing an API, an API call that produces the same information every single time you do a new form, right? That's again what's the best use of an expensive resource is time.
Exactly. All right. Well, I don't see any more questions in here. Yeah. So thank you, Bill, for taking time to do this. Bill did a a long form version of this as a blog post. I don't know, Bill, if you have that to hand, if you can drop in the links.
You can find it at unfetteredmarketing.com/blog. Probably just type Zapier in the search and you'll get it. It was back from earlier this year.
Yeah. So it looks like it was posted December of last year. So it was the end of last year. When I saw this, I was like, Bill, do you want to do this on me? And he's like, sure. It's just a matter of finding the right time.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So I posted a link in the chat. I would highly recommend bookmarking his blog. Posts a lot of really good stuff. He's one of the better blogs out there because it's very tactical and very functional and very useful in your day-to-day. So I would encourage you to check it out. And this will also, like I said, be up on YouTube on the Pardot Geeks blog, and then it'll also likely be on his blog as well at some point. So thank you so much. This has been great. A lot of good questions, super valuable. And everyone, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.
Yep. Enjoy.
Thank you. Bye.